All right, hello guys. Here I am with the recap about the trade that I took, but it was a no tag, and actually trades that I took today. So yeah, let's start everything with the markups first. Here's the 4-hour markup on GU. Well, technically nothing has happened since yesterday, and in the previous recap I did not analyze the 4-hour markup, but in this recap I'm going to. But actually it doesn't really need that much of an in-depth analysis. So what happened on the 4-hour time frame? Price reacted on this 4-hour demand area, actually made a mitigation, a bit deeper mitigation on this 4-hour demand area. That has caused the swing breakout structure to the upside with really nice volume candle, as you can see. So price has just returned back to this demand, and after this demand mitigation, we could wait for 15-minute change of character. If it happened, we could look for longs, or actually we could wait for shorts down to the 50%, but GU tends to not mitigate 50% of the zones, so we had a bit higher chance to go to the upside without 50% mitigation. But technically, that's all. What can we see on the 4-hour time frame? Also, we can see one more thing. This one right here. Technically, we have perfect liquidity creation for the longs in the upcoming days, and this liquidity has been built up here for a reason, and I believe it has been already swept out, but we will see that in the real chart. So yeah, that's all about the 4-hour time frame. Let's take a look on the 15-minute. On the 15-minute time frame, what has happened? Well, there was the last recent 15-minute swing breakout structure to the downside, and as you can see, here is this movement right here. This movement right here, this downside movement, couldn't really manage to break below the previous swing low point, reverse back to the upside, and after that, a new swing breakout structure happened. So technically, this is a strong high. This is a weak high. Probably this zone has a really high chance to be weak, and that's why I wasn't 100% sure about a short right here. But on the other hand, it could play out, but it wasn't really my plan in this session, because after that, as you can see, there was a body break right here above this high point, and also price has broken above this 5-minute supply area. However, after this break above, well, technically price has reversed back to the downside with stronger bearish movements, and because of these stronger bearish movements, it was stronger. The bearish movements were stronger than the bullish ones. I wasn't 100% convinced. I wasn't 100% sure about this break right here. And that's why I would approach this confirmation entry on the last recent 15-minute demand area. That has caused really nice volume, by the way, and had liquidity above it. So technically this was liquidity. And also this low became liquidity because it was a middle of nowhere reversal. But I will talk this low point later in this recap. So because I wasn't 100% sure about this change of character to the upside. The body break to the upside right here, because after the break, price immediately started a bearish movement to the downside, printed stronger bearish movements in this case than bullish movements. So I wasn't 100% sure about this break, and that's why I was still expecting deeper mitigation on this 4-hour demand area. That's why I was still expecting a break of this low point. And also, if you take a look right here, technically this was liquidity built up for a possible 50% mitigation, and that's why I was focusing shorts mainly in this session. But yeah, as you can see, here is the last recent 15-minute supply that has caused this bearish push to the downside. Still has inefficiency, price couldn't manage to mitigate it, and that's why I was expecting a confirmation right here if a mitigation of this 15-minute demand did not happen beforehand. And actually, even though this zone has been mitigated during the session, I was still expecting a confirmation entry on this zone, but I will talk about it later in this recap. So yeah, as you can see, here were the plans for the session. If this 15-minute supply could give us a confirmation entry, if price reverts back to this supply, levitated back to this supply, I would look for sales down to this 15-minute demand. Or maybe I would target this low point right here. I would target this liquidity trend line right here. Perfect. My second plan was to wait for a flip of this supply area, and I was 100% sure about that. If this supply fails, if this 50-minute supply fails, then this supply right here, which is technically weak, it had a really great chance to be weak because it could have made a swing breakout structure to the downside. It had really great chance to be broken, and that's why I would expect longs after the flip of the last recent 50-minute supply area. Also, I was still expecting a possible long opportunity from this zone, but I was more cautious with it, and actually I have written down my explanation right here because I wasn't 100% convinced about this break on this high point, so that's why I would approach this demand a bit more with a bit more cautious. So yeah, of course I had another plan, which was the flip of this demand. If the flip of this demand happened, so if price flipped this demand, I would definitely target this low point right here, or I would target the 50% of the 4-hour demand area. And yeah, also price swept really nice amount of liquidity from this region, even though there was a body break. But once again, I wouldn't 100% come with it. So yeah, technically that's all based on the 50-minute time frame. Let's take a look on the 5-minute, because on the 5-minute time frame we had one more possible scenario, which was this 5-minute supply zone. It was based on this 5-minute supply area. This 5-minute supply area caused the breakout structure here to the downside. And as you can see, price didn't mitigate the 50-minute demand right here. So technically this was a middle of nowhere reversal. And this middle of nowhere reversal equaled as liquidity for the possible shorts after this 5-minute supply zone mitigation. So that was the reason I was waiting for a possible confirmation entry on the last recent 5-minute supply. I would definitely target this 50-minute demand at least with my pair shares, and this was my plan technically. So I would close 5.5 risk reward ratio at this demand if price would tag me in. Unfortunately, it didn't tag me in, so it was a no tag trade for me. So yeah, what can we see right here? Technically, this whole movement seems like a perfect liquidity creation, liquidity pool for the upcoming longs after the mitigation of this zone, or after a deeper 4-hour zone mitigation where we would need 50-minute change of character, and after the 50-minute event we could look for longs targeting this liquidity. But yeah, even though there was a chance to see a confirmation entry here, once again I was a bit cautious with it because, as I already explained, on the 15-minute time frame I wasn't 100% sure about this break right here. And also, if you take a look at the movements, if we are comparing the movements in this bearish movement to the downside, we can definitely see that the bullish movements were weaker than the bearish ones. So the bearish movements were stronger than the bullish ones. So yeah, and technically this was the only additional possible scenario on the 5-minute time frame. Everything was technically the same as it was on the 15-minute time frame. So we can look for the real chart on the TradingView. Let me put the screen into a full screen, and here is the 15-minute markups. Here is the 15-minute zones that are used in the markup. So as you can see, price has managed to mitigate the 5-minute supply first. And actually the session started right here with this candle. So as you can see, price built up a really nice amount of liquidity right here below the 5-minute fixed supply. That has caused the breakout structure here. This was a middle of nowhere reversal. And after the sweep of this liquidity, even though there was liquidity above this 5-minute fixed supply, because of its own liquidity right here, and also we can mark this liquidity like this one, So this zone had its own liquidity. It wasn't 100% necessary for the price to sweep this liquidity in order to mitigate the demand, in order to reverse from this supply. And yeah, this was the liquidity for me. There was liquidity. This liquidity functioned as liquidity take for the higher time frame zone. Also, price made a higher time frame zone mitigation, which was the first criteria. So first one, liquidity was there. So this was the second criteria. The third criteria was inefficiency. As you can see, price after the sweep of this liquidity right here, after the wick above of the supply area, immediately reverse back to the downside, change character here to the downside. This was the last recent low point that has caused a new breakout structure to the upside. And this was the last recent 1 minute demand area that has printed volume candles. I wanted to see the fail of the zone, at least with the wick. The wick break happened, so change of character happened. And we were technically in a pro order flow at this region. 15 minute has showed bearish interest, showed bearish signs, at least down to this 15-minute demand area. So yeah, so this was our fourth criteria. We are in a technically pro order flow. After the four base criteria, I started to count the variable ones. The first one was the change of character that has happened right here. There was perfect V-shaped recovery, 50% mitigation on the higher time frame zone, and also liquidity to target on the downside. Technically, this was liquidity right here. Also, this low point in itself was liquidity because it was a middle of nowhere reversal. So this was our 8th criteria. The 9th criteria was the not coming from an opposite-sided zone. Price did not come from any opposite-sided zone at this region. This was the 5-minute high point, 5-minute low point. This was just a substructure. Price confirmed the last recent 5-minute supply. And yeah, there wasn't any possible demand area at this point right here. I did count the corrective pullback strong pro movements. So as I said, as I explained already, when I explained the markups, at this point, the bearish movements were stronger than the bullish ones. And that's why I wasn't 100% convinced about the longs from here, but I have already explained it several times in this recap. So yeah, corrective pullback, strong pro criteria was there. Bearish movements were stronger than the bullish ones. And this was my 10th criteria for this trade opportunity. So this was the 10th criteria. The only missing criteria for me for this entry zone right here was the combined liquidation. There wasn't combined liquidation, but it wasn't necessary because price has already swept really nice amount of liquidity from below the 5-minute wick supply area. So these were my criteria for this trade. Let me delete these drawings one by one because I can't do it at the same time. Bear with me. And let me put the drawings back on my chart. And here was the node tag, as you can see. So as you can see, I was targeting this 5-minute, 15-minute demand area that I have marked out in the 15-minute, in the markups. I had a 50% equilibrium entry on this entry POI, sorry, and I have buffered my stop loss level in this case. A couple of pips, maybe, yeah. I have buffered my stop loss level with 0.5 pips, and that's why I used 3 pip stop loss. Try to enter on the 50%. As you can see, price couldn't tag me in on the 50%, reversed at the bottom of the entry POI. And after the reaction, after the mitigation of this entry POI, price immediately in 6 minutes would hit my partial TP level. I would definitely close at least 50% of my position right here. I used 0.5 risk here. So yeah, I would definitely close 50% at this point at 5.5 risk reward ratio. However, my final TP would have been this low point because I was expecting still a 50% mitigation on this 4-hour demand area. And yeah, and also this 5.5 risk reward ratio almost perfectly lined up with the 50% of the whole full TP position. So yeah, I had 10 criteria for this entry opportunity. After the break of this low point, I deleted my limit order on this entry POI, and price had just mitigated this 15-minute demand. So this was a no-tech trade for me, 10 criteria. It was perfect to find. I was looking for another entry opportunities. And after this 15-minute demand mitigation, technically the 1-minute time frame has changed character here to the upside, left behind two possible entry POIs. This was the first one, which was also a flip zone right here. And there was the extreme zone, which was the origin of this whole character changing movement to the upside. But as I said, once again, I wasn't 100% sure about the 15-minute demand right here because I wasn't 100% sure about this break on this 15-minute, 5-minute supply area. And I was still looking for sells in this case. And if you take a look right here, technically this zone mitigation, this 5-minute zone mitigation has printed more liquidity on the table for this 15-minute supply area. And after this 15-minute demand area, I really wanted to see the fail of this 15-minute supply in order to execute longs. But as you can see, after the mitigation of this zone, price has changed character to the downside right here. But before the change of character, there was a possible entry opportunity that some of you has taken during the session. So there was the change of character or flip. And technically we had two zones right here, the decision and the extreme. The extreme zone technically hold the price. But in this case, I had one issue with that entry opportunity, which was high impact news release exactly at this point. So the tag-in would have happened with a high impact news candle. There was a high impact news release exactly at 4 p.m., 1 hour before session close. And yeah, I wouldn't enter in this position, even though if it would be a really beautiful entry opportunity. Actually, it was a nice entry opportunity, but if it happened on this supply area, for example, this setup, I wouldn't enter right here because there was high impact news. So that's my only issue with this setup. However, it has provided really nice risk reward ratio, but because of the news release, it was a bit risky. And that's my main issue with this setup. And yeah, that's all. But after this 15-minute supply zone mitigation, technically the 1-minute change of character happened right here. I really wanted to say the fail of this zone, fail of this low point right here. Technically, this was the last recent low point that has caused the break of structure here to the downside, upside. And after this 15-minute supply zone mitigation, this was the flip movement that has happened on this 1-minute demand area. And unfortunately, and actually, fortunately, I fucked up my chart. I couldn't really set or copy the prices from this short position, and I couldn't really place a limit order on the decision zone, which was the flip zone in this case, directly. So technically this decision zone caused the flip of the last recent 1-minute demand area. And after I saw these candles right here, I somehow figured out what did I do wrong. So how did I fuck up the whole chart on my trading view? I set a limit order exactly at the 50% of this extreme zone, which was the origin of this whole character changing movement to downside after the sweep of this liquidity after this 15-minute supply zone mitigation. And you can see that I had another no tag on the 50% of this zone. Price had just reversed to the downside after a small percent mitigation. I also buffered my stop loss at this point. On GU, I am buffering my stop loss because of the spread on Finotiv. So yeah, I had a no tag, but after this reaction, after I saw this canter printing right here, I decided to delete my order from this zone. And yeah, and I also needed liquidity creation below the 50% in order to enter on a zone, because the 1 minute zone has been already mitigated right here. So a base criteria was missing for me after this reaction. So yeah, technically that's all, guys. I also had 10 criterias for this setup, and actually I had 11 criterias because technically the decision was the combined liquidation, and I still count the corrective pullbacks from pro movements criteria. So yeah, I had 11 criterias for the extreme zone. Probably I would have 10 criterias for the decision. The only missing criteria would have been the combined liquidation. But yeah, I deleted this order on the extreme zone. And technically, that's all, guys. This was my thought process during the session. This is why I wasn't 100% sure about the long from here, but it was a good trade. But the only one issue that I have with this entry opportunity on this extreme was the high impact news release exactly with this same candle that has caused a tag on the extreme zone. But actually, that's all. I really hope you can grab some value from this recap and from the previous one. See you guys tomorrow. I will manage New York session once again, so Marcel will be in London. See you guys tomorrow and have a nice rest of the day. Take care and bye.